Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's Monday, so it's hectic, but
How's everything, man?
I think it's pretty good. I'm just trying
hmm
to figure out what the week looks like.
What are you dealing with?
Um, Dude, I don't know. That's like the one thing that's like tough with like uh my actual boss is like I don't really know what the week looks like because there's not like a set structure.
hmm
So it's like there's like bare bones, like I have meetings on these days, and then like we do this on these days, but we're just sort of like getting it fleshed out. So it's not like very fluid yet. There's not a cadence. So
hmm
he messaged me like at 10 my time because I'm Mountain Standard Time. And
hmm
he messaged me. He's like, I'm waiting for you. And I'm like, why? We said we're not doing Monday meetings. And he
Yeah.
was like, and then he was like, question mark, question mark. And then I was like, yeah, we said we're doing Wednesday, Friday. And he was like, oh, yeah, I remember. I was like, okay.
I'm glad you're doing good. How are you dealing with winter?
It's really not too bad. I mean, we get pretty mild winters in Utah, not gonna lie. Like we had worse winters when I lived in Kansas.
Mm.
Like quite a bit worse. Like we would get drifts of snow. We have days where it would go from like 50 to like 5 or like -1 because of wind chill.
hmm
Here's pretty normal. It's like it'll get cold, but because of the mountains and the way they hold in the weather, it'll
hmm
stay in the 30s. Like yesterday, it was like 40, and we were out at night and it was like 40 degrees. So it was like pretty warm. Um, it's great here to like ease into things like cold exposure though, because it's not totally chilly, you could take a walk or sit outside for like 20 minutes at
hmm
20 degrees, 30 degrees, and it's not too bad unless there's wind. And then if there's sun, I was telling you, we went hiking the other day and I was like taking my shirt off in the snow at like 7,000 feet or
hmm
probably like 6,000 feet because there was enough sun and it was still that it actually felt warm. And so I was thinking, okay, I wonder what UV I can get from the light reflection off the snow. So I was
hmm
like, maybe I can make some vitamin D when
Yeah.
I can't for the next 70 days. But it's not too bad. I think you got to embrace it. And that's like one of the most difficult things. I've always struggled with the cold more than anything.
hmm
And you just gotta embrace it. The more I've learned, the simpler things become, but sometimes the more tedious it is to implement
hmm
because who likes going out in the cold? I think you can get to a place where you enjoy aspects of it for sure, but I've never been a skier. I've never been like into the winter activities that are commonplace here.
hmm
So for me, it's always been the hardest to get out in the winter. But I definitely feel the difference, like especially from the sunlight aspect. So like I have a red light therapy device, so
hmm
I'll use that more often even in the winter because it's like okay, sunrise is even harder to, and when it's
hmm
cloudy and we have the mountains, so I don't actually see the sunrise over horizon. I have to wait
hmm
till it's like probably 20 degrees above the horizon to get above the mountains anyways. So I implement things like red light and like ideally things like infrared sauna and stuff in the winter more
hmm
often. I kind of look at it from like a Scandinavian point of view. It's like okay,
hmm
what do they do in the winter to maximize? Well, they embrace winter and then they do things like sauna and stuff like that to make it as optimal as possible. But it's definitely I think the winter is where you make or break based on the summer. If you didn't prep in
Exactly.
the summer, you're screwed in the winter.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's super important to embrace different seasons, of course, because it's what helps the body be how it's supposed to be. But to me, that's been the most difficult thing for me right now in winter. The whole light thing. Today, I woke up at 6:30, like I always do, but it was so dark that I thought I woke up like 1, and I mean, it's a little bit depressing. It doesn't make me feel good. It's really hard to like wake up. It's so dark. I love the cold. Like it's one of my favorite things in the world. But this whole dark thing is not does not have me in a good mood.
No, I totally agree. And actually, it's funny. I have a good friend, and I had a coaching client that were both from Scotland. And
Mm,
this time of year in Scotland sucks. Like, sucks more than I'm actually blessed to be where I'm at. I think
mhm,
I'm 40th latitude. He's near 60th latitude. And
mm,
so he gets the massive circadian disruptive. In the summer, he has tons of light,
mhm,
almost to a disruptive level. because it has 4 to 5 hours of darkness. And
Yeah.
then it's the opposite in the winter. And when you're trying to optimize health issues in the winter, I was telling him, I was like, it's gonna be harder. In fact, I almost go into winter thinking like, how can we just baseline through the
Mm-hmm.
winter and not get
Mm-hmm.
worse? And if you were not, like I said a second ago, if you weren't doing things in the summer and you're at a higher latitude, like you weren't embracing the sun, you weren't building your solar house, you weren't getting optimal amounts of vitamin D, you weren't
Yeah.
grounding, you weren't doing all this stuff, you're going in the winter in a deficit. And I think that's why we see so many things in standard of health just
Mm.
plummet in the winter, because nobody in generic, generic normie life does any of this stuff in the summer anyways. So
Yeah.
they're going in the winter, their vitamin D is 31 all year round, and then they
Mm-hmm.
get to winter and then it goes deficient and then they're screwed. So it's a simple fix, but you gotta understand nature's rhythms and where you're at.
Of
And I
course.
mean, you get it, all the stuff that you talk about. So
Mm-hmm.
all that nuance.
Yeah. Ryan, so talk to me about you. What's your story? What got you to where you are today?
Man, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Probably like everyone else. I mean, it's
Give me the
funny.
whole thing, man, as much as you want to share.
Totally. So we'll get a little therapized in here, and actually, I have therapy after this, so I'll get to do my EMDR and offload some of my trauma. But for me, everything started for me when I moved to Utah from Kansas. My girlfriend's sitting over here, and she's heard the story 1,000 times, so she'll probably be like nodding her head or shaking it, depending on how I tell it.
Yeah.
But I moved to Utah when I was 13. It was a very traumatic experience for me. My dad just lost his job out of nowhere, very unexpected. Um, and I knew we were going to move. And I sort of had this established group of friends. I was going into high school. So very mentally, mentally acute period of time for a
Yeah.
child's development. Like you're going into high school, teens are already weird. Middle school is the weirdest 3 years of your life. Like it's the most
Yeah.
awkward stages. And I had a really close knit friend group. We were outside all the time. I was a very outdoor child, like tons of
Mm.
outdoor time, like very abnormal for, I think, the current generation growing up now. Like we had video games and stuff like GameCube, and we would play them, but we would be outside. We'd be
Mhm.
on dirt hills throwing dirt at each other. We'd be climbing trees. We'd be climbing other people's trees because we didn't have trees in our yard. So we get in trouble. We'd be stealing tomatoes from neighbors' gardens and eating them and like all this stuff outside, just running around town. I grew up in a very small Midwestern town, um, like sub 10,000 people at the time. So now I'm in a bigger city, so it's like completely different. But looking back, I was very fortunate. But when we moved to Utah, it was so abrupt that, and it was such a culture shock because just religion's different, a lot of LDS, um, Mormon religion here. And I think I was just at such a delicate stage. Like I had such a close knit group of friends that I really didn't accept the move. I was very in denial about it. And I was very, um, passively aggressive towards my parents for like the next several years about moving, and I just never accepted it. And when I got here, I just could not for the life of me make friends. Everything was taxing. Like social interaction felt like work, which it never had been before. I was a very outgoing person as a kid,
Mhm.
but I just couldn't relate to anybody. And it was tough. And so I really internalized. And that's when I started developing things like anxiety. OCD started like showing its face in my life because I felt this loss of control. And
Mm.
what I later came to realize was I was just trying to control the little life I had left and like keep
Mm.
my sanity. So that was like through high school, end of high school, get my first like real close relationship, like my first girlfriend. She was Mormon, I was not Mormon. Long story short, I became Mormon for
Mm.
her. I actually converted to the church, didn't tell my parents I was going to convert. My mom finds out one day that I'm going to get baptized. She freaks on me. And then she basically like, okay, at this point I'm 18. And she's like, you know what? You can make your own mistakes. Do it. So I get baptized. They all go to my baptism, very supportive. I give a very lengthy speech at my baptism where I quote things like Led Zeppelin songs and things that you don't do as a good Mormon, just because I didn't really believe their philosophy. I was
Mm.
just doing it for this girl at the time. Um, and then of course, because of that, I can't fake it forever. So that falls apart. And
Yeah.
then that breakup combined with the stresses that I had been building over periods of years really sent me into like the darkest place I think I have ever been. darker than my autoimmune stuff later. And that's where my anorexia was triggered, but it was triggered from a place of me wanting to better myself. So sort of like you, when you were looking at your life, and I was around similar age, like I was 19, you're
Mhm.
17, but I was looking at my life and I was like, how can I take control of my life? How can I be better so that this stuff doesn't happen to me again? And to me, that was health and fitness. So I started getting into very stereotypical like bodybuilding stuff, content online, following people like Athlean X, Jeff Cavalier on YouTube, like doing workouts and like cleaning up my diet and doing all the like stereotypical things that I thought were right. But I took it to like an nth degree and actually ended up losing like 50 pounds. Well, no, how many pounds? 120, about 40 pounds,
And
40, 50 pounds.
how much did you weigh before that?
So I was like 130 pounds.
Mhm,
I'm 5'9". I was always kind of a skinnier, slender dude. So
mhm,
I always had a hard time putting on weight, mostly just because I probably didn't eat enough to do it when I was working out. But
mhm.
in the health community, you see a lot of people needing to lose weight. And when you look at like bodybuilding and aesthetic like stuff specifically, you see a lot of people like, oh, I'm going into cut season, so I'm going to get
Yeah,
ripped. And I wanted to do that. I was already low body fat, so I didn't need to
yeah.
do that. But in my head, I was like, everyone's doing this. I need to do that. So I did that. And next thing I know, frankly, it felt like overnight because it was such a gradual process. I'm
Mhm.
80, 85, 88 pounds. And my
Wow.
dad's looking at me when I get out of the shower one day and my shirt's off. And he's like, dude, you have a problem. Um, and that's when it hit me like, yeah, I actually do have a problem. But that was sort of the beginning of my journey of like, how do I dig myself out of this
Mm,
hole now in a way that's healthy? Because I started going to see a nutritionist, very stereotypical standard of care. Like they showed me like a little picture of a plate and like how to build it and all this bullshit.
yeah.
Um, and I was so in my head that I was like, I know more than this lady about food. Like
Mhm,
I knew actually, and it's funny, intuitively, um, the things that we like to talk about when it comes to food, I thought of those principles then,
mm,
not in the complexities of like mitochondria and
mhm.
electrons and all that stuff, but I knew that standard American diet made no sense.
Of course.
And the way you heal from anorexia, it was a very conflicting thing because in standard of care, you got to eat everything, otherwise you have an eating disorder.
Mhm,
And I was so conflicted with that. So I had a really hard time gaining weight and recovering in that paradigm because I would freak out and I was still having these mental episodes. And I didn't take care of the mental trauma aspects of things that I think really were the root of that, my insecurities and my anxieties and the move and all that trauma. I never focused on that. And I've only actually been digging into that this last year. So I've only really gotten to that part of my life now because
and
I was
how are
like,
you
you know,
doing with
now
that?
I need to look at that. Um, but
How
it's,
how are you dealing with that right now?
you know, I would say there are areas where I struggle because I like to be right.
Mm,
And I've always been like I've done like you know how you can do those personality quizzes and they tell you like if you're a debater or like an assist I don't remember what the other ones are like a
yeah.
logistician or like I'm 100% a debater, 100%. Like even last night when we were out with some friends, I was something came up and I almost like went on attack mode. I was like, but there's no way. I've had to learn that there are certain situations when you're not going to get anything out of it. You're not going to lead anyone to water, and they're certainly not going to drink if you do lead them there.
Mhm,
So I've learned that and I'm still like working on this. I'm hardly perfect at
yes.
all. I'm sort of like Jack Cruz in the sense where like when something I know is wrong hits me, I want to stop them and I want to like talk for 3 hours to get them
Yeah.
to hope, but it's in an aggressive fashion. So
Mhm,
it's almost more off-putting that it is inclusive. So that's an area of communication where I want to grow. But I'd say I'm doing well in the aspect that I realize where my faults are, I
mm,
accept them, but now I need to take action on on changing behavior and creating new neural pathways. It
mhm,
took me until really the last year or two to even get to the acceptance part of like,
mm,
you know what, I do have these uh, neural patterns of going to aggression based on these insecurities that I've had in my past. And
mhm,
now it's time to confront those things
mhm,
and not be, and I'll say a lot like in posts, like not being the victim. And what I mean by that is accepting where you are at and not looking at other people that maybe are where you want to be
Of
and say,
course.
I have to be there right now.
Mhm.
Like, I got to know that I need to work on these things. And that's okay to
Mm,
not have them figured out yet. But it's not okay to address them and just be like, oh, it's just how I am. Guess
yeah.
I'm just an aggressive person. Because
Mhm.
that's not personal growth. You know what I mean? And I'm obsessed with personal growth, and now in a positive way, where before it was like actually a deterrent to
Mhm.
progress. So that's sort of my story in a nutshell. But when I was 23, I thought I had figured it out. I was living in LA at the time, which is also a terrible place to live for health. The Van Island belts and all that stuff. We could get
Yes.
into that, some crazy stuff. Got
Mhm.
3 Van Island belts over LA, EMF City.
Mhm.
Um, but I started getting neuropathy in my right hand one day. And at the time, I was a video editor.
Mhm.
And I was thinking like, oh, it's probably carpal tunnel. And my friend had carpal tunnel that I worked with. So he was like, yeah, we'll get a brace of Walgreens. We'll be good. Got that. And in like a week, it was like in my other wrist. And I was like, great, I have carpal tunnel on both wrists. Um, but within a month, that tingling kind of nummy feeling started going up my arms. And I remember one day I woke up and my entire spine from like the base of my head to my tailbone was on fire, like fire. And I'd worked out the day before and I felt off. Like I
Mhm.
was doing rows in the gym with a barbell. And I was just like, man, I feel weird. Like I'm kind of oddly sore and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I woke up the next day just burning, just straight out of bed, just woke up and it was like burning. I didn't wake up in the middle of the night or anything, just like in the morning. So I go to the urgent care. They do an x-ray of my spine, which of course leads to nothing. I've almost learned x-rays are almost like the one of the like most pointless things to get. We're for certain things, like when you know it's not
Mhm.
like a hard tissue thing. But anyway, um, he's like, yeah, you probably pinched some nerves in here. And I'm like, you think I might have pinched some nerves in here?
Yeah.
Thanks, doc. That was $300 of my time. Thank you. um, and I go home. He tells me to rest for 4 weeks, but I like knew this wasn't normal because of the other things that had been going on leading up to that.
Mhm.
And I left out a piece of the story where about a month before I got the carpal tunnel, what I thought in my hand, we went to England to visit my cousins for 2 weeks. And I had some crazy stomach pain when I
Mm.
was there for like 4 days straight of just like could barely walk. So I was like popping Tums. I was like doing everything. I was like, I don't know what this is. So I'm like throwing everything at it. I'm like I'm taking the max amount of Tums you can a day. Like, because I'm like, I don't know if it's indigestion or what, but I really do think that like that was a sign that something was going to happen to me.
Mhm.
Like they talk about the gut and like, I think it's one of the ancient Greek people. They talk about like gut leading to all that sort of stuff. Now that's like
Mhm.
a bunch of nuance as well.
And
There's
and
lights
at,
in there.
like, the time when you were starting to have these, like, gut, episodes, I don't wanna call them issues, did you feel that something was coming up at the time, or was it after that that you understood
It was after. It was really when I started getting the nerve stuff in my hands that I knew something was up.
and you know
But
it was related or something?
yeah.
Okay.
And up until this point, I was living a very high stress lifestyle. Like I was stressed all the time. I was very emotional because I didn't like where I lived. I didn't like living in LA. I was already there for 2 years. I hated it. I told everyone how much I hated it all the time. I was inside all the time. I never went to the beach. I
Mm.
never did anything. I was basically a recluse in my apartment. I'd watch anime and play RuneScape on my computer at the same time. Like that was what I did for fun after work. And I'd worked myself to death.
Mhm.
Um, and so the stars had been aligning for a long time. And so it wasn't just like a freak thing. And I tell people this all the time. It's like things don't just happen unless you like get hit by a bus or something. But this had been building probably since my anorexia. I think my anorexia took out my body's mitochondrial like resilience. And when I healed improperly from that, just doing sad and just gaining weight because I thought that's all you needed, my hormones were probably out of sync. I probably had
So,
terrible
how
circadian
long
issues.
how long was the time between your anorexia and when you started to feel these?
Oh yeah. So between 19 and 23, so
Oh,
4 years. So I had 4 years of what I would say stable weight, but continued anorexia behavior, meaning like over exercise.
mhm.
I already was fatigued all the time. I was pushing my body to the max. Like I remember pre-developing autoimmune issues, even though I was like a normal weight and I was working out and all this stuff, I was like, my energy's shot. Like by 4 p.m., I could go to sleep and I would be in bed asleep by 8 every day. I'd be out. But like 4 p.m. every day, I'd be, so things were building up. Like in retrospect, stuff was happening, but I just assumed that I needed more carbs or something. Like, oh, I just needed more carbs. So I was
Yeah.
eating like 400 grams I was eating like 6 cups of oatmeal a day, like
Mm-hmm.
6 dry cups of oatmeal.
Okay.
Okay. And then like 10 egg omelets. And like, I ate tons of spinach and a bunch of other stuff too. But because I was poor and in LA, I basically ate tuna, oatmeal, whey protein, egg whites, and eggs. Like that was like pretty much my entire diet. Tons of like broccoli and crazy stuff. But I didn't have like tons of money to actually like, get crazy food. So, um, yeah, my story is very interesting. Well, a lot of stories are interesting, but mine perplexes me because there's so many things I did wrong
Mm-hmm.
that there is no boogeyman. And that's like the
Mm-hmm.
thing I try to get to people is like, it was all this shit
It was a
that
big buildup.
crushed me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, big buildup. I mean, eating tuna every day for 4 years is stupid. Like, yeah. And I literally had high mercury in my blood 3 months after eating fish. Like, I went to the doctor. I was like, hey, can we like look at this? And he was like, dude, you're crazy, but I guess we'll look at it. And he was like, called me up and he was like, yeah, you have a problem. You need to stop eating fish. And I was like, dude, I did 4 months ago and it's still high.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
then that's really when I started getting down rabbit holes outside of conventional wisdom because I knew they couldn't help me at that point.
Of course.
But the premise of the story is that it wasn't just mercury, it wasn't just anorexia, it wasn't just chronic stress, it wasn't just living in an apartment that had mold in it. like but it's all that stuff. It was
Of
all of
course.
it. I was getting no light, I was getting no sleep. I thought I was like it's all the things. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why um as we'll talk more, it's like it's about doing all the things right,
Mm.
but it's not necessarily hard. It's just like understanding nature's laws and then living by them. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like I got stupid red light bulbs in here. You know what I mean? It's like making the best of what you can. It's not about being perfect. And I had tried to be perfect for so long that I
Mm-hmm.
knew that that's what destroyed me was this idea of
Mm-hmm.
like I had to get it 100%, but I wasn't listening to nature at all.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a big problem nowadays with all of disease. It's just ignoring nature, ignoring who you are, disconnecting from that, and that's where it all builds up. And there's something, well, I watched a couple of your YouTube videos on your account and something you mentioned yesterday, which was through all of this, there was always some part of a lot of anxiety. Almost when you were starting to deal with autoimmune issues, you really wanted it to get diagnosed, and you were looking for a diagnosis for yourself, like besides doctors through Google or whatever. Um, and it leads you to these like st- like stupid worry holes. This used to happen to me where you feel something and now you feel like you're having a heart attack. You know what I mean? So my question here, if this makes sense, is how do we overcome negative thoughts?
it's it's not easy, and I don't even know if it's completely like I don't know if you could ever get rid of like never have a negative thought.
Of course.
It's still something that I struggle with, but it's so much less. It's almost hard to fathom unless you've known me the entire time. But it's so much less than it's ever been in my like entire existence. Like since I was 13 and I moved, the amount of like negative like, and I'm not gonna lie, like I think inherently I'm a pessimistic person.
Mm,
Like since I moved, like very pessimistic. So it's been a quality I've tried to work on, and it hasn't been easy, and I still struggle with it, but it's
mm-hmm,
better than it's ever been. And the idea that I've sort of come to, and therapy has helped with this, just getting to better understand my own psyche and how I would put up certain shields throughout my life as a way to try and heal, but ended up making it worse through certain behaviors. Um, and for me, it's really about being less impulsive and being able to when things come up, being able to sit with it and really think it through before you make a rash decision whether or not it's like going crazy. um but you got to be, I think you got to know who you are, I think too. Um, and I was very fortunate that I think these experiences allowed me to know who I am on a way deeper level than maybe some people learn their entire lives having not gone
Mm,
through struggles.
okay.
Um, but you learn through adversity, and everyone's had adversity, I think. Even, even if they don't feel like they had because they're trying to compare it, I think everyone's had adverse moments in their life. And it's understanding like, okay, I think actually for me it's knowing that I've gone through so many things and I'm still here, that makes it easier to get through this current hard moment, because it's like it'll pass. um and realizing that the world doesn't revolve around you, like you are like you are the MVP of your life, but we're really just like this speck of dust on a speck of dust in an ever expanding universe. um, and that I found solace in in everyone searches for purpose, for example. And I still do, but honestly, it's like, and my girlfriend's gonna laugh at me in 2 seconds, but it's like I just want to be human. Like if I can just achieve being human as a purpose, I don't need anything else. I don't need to have like an empire. I don't need to be Dave Asprey and sell a bunch of junk. Um,
So,
like
so what is it to be human?
I think being human is mostly about being able to be in the moment and exist in your space and just be observant of things. Because
Mm,
I spent so much of my life, and I still do this. It's much better, but I still do this, and I catch myself. Everyone looks for tomorrow and how
of
tomorrow
course.
can be better, and
Mm-hmm.
no one focuses on today.
Mm-hmm.
And let's forget about like the things we could do today to make tomorrow better, like that saying. But like just being, my girlfriend reminds me all the time, and it makes me feel terrible because she's right, that I have a hard time being in the moment, because, and it's even harder now with
Mm-hmm.
all this junk that we're on all the time and like the way we do our jobs,
Mm-hmm.
because it's nice to just sit outside. Like that's why the summer is great. You can just go out in your backyard or go to a park. And we've done this, like a lot of our early dates were just like going to parks and sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you just like sit in space. And I
Mm-hmm.
think being human is to be curious. It is to like have philosophy about things, think about ideas. Um, but it's also like we're just freaking animals. Like I think if you just like remove like our weird, crazy, silly talking monkey brain that Jack Cruz will say and all that stuff. Like if you remove that, we're just another freaking ape sitting around, and we just apparently can have more cohesive thoughts. But I'll sit and look at like our cat, and I'll wonder what they're thinking about. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I'm like, there's more going on in there. Maybe not on the level that I think about things, but there's stuff going on in there. They have feelings. Like I see it. Like I see it when they come up and like lick me in the face, like he wants something. Um, and so to me, being human is just, I don't know. It sounds dumb. To me, being human is just being. Like if you can, it's sort of like the hokey Buddhism stuff. It's like just be in space.
Do you think maybe, have you ever felt maybe that we are more than just an animal?
I mean, it depends how you look at it. Like I can see that perspective. I don't think one perspective is necessarily like correct. I
Mm-hmm.
think what made it simpler for me is not trying to be grandiose, because me coming from a world of social media and working in social media, that's what everyone's trying to do. And it gets tedious. Everyone's trying to be something. Everyone's trying to trick people into watching something for longer. Like literally, I would have content meetings with my friend, and I've listened to Mr. Beast talk. I've met him. I go to conferences that he runs. I've talked to him in person. I've seen him give talks. That dude is a perfect example of like analyzing every moment of everything so that you can get someone to click, to watch longer, and then watch more.
Mm.
Um, and I think he does amazing, great things. But I don't want to do that. Like I don't want to have to, I don't want to be grandiose. I don't want to be a philosopher. I don't want to be like a Caesar. I don't want and I used to want this stuff. That's why I wanted to be an actor. Like I wanted to be in front of people on stage. I wanted to do it, but I wanted the attention. And now I don't need the attention. I like talking about things, and I like making other people feel good. That's why I do the health coach and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there's sort of a great feeling in like not being a somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's a wrong thing to do, but it's sort of like, I think if you can remove yourself from that need,
Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll just happen as well.
yeah, I think it's more powerful. Um, when you're not necessarily seeking something. Like, to me, the greatest YouTubers ever started out doing it for fun, and then just boom, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They were always the most impressive to me. Not Mr. Beast, who's very impressive, but he's so calculated that it's almost boring to me and frustrating. Um,
Mm.
because I'll do this. We've done this thing where it's like we'll sit down, analyze a video, we'll go through the bar of the retention and be like, okay, right here it dipped. Why did it dip, and how can we avoid that next time? It takes away the authenticity. I think to be human is to be authentic, but to be successful as a human, sometimes people feel they need to be inauthentic or fake authenticity to
Mm-hmm.
please an audience. And I just don't think that that's necessarily the way. Definitely works, because I have friends that I tell you are fake as fuck, and it works. And there are millions of subs on YouTube. They do all this crazy stuff. Good for them. I hate it. but it's a really, I don't know. I'm sort of like a casual observer of what I think is the truth. That's how I like live my life now. I just like watching things and then trying to figure out how it works. But I try to be less analytical nowadays than I ever have been, just because I've spent too much energy trying to figure out everything. And it's kind of nice to just go with the flow and
Mm-hmm.
let just kind of like, that's why I think some of this stuff's so cool, because it's like, just follow nature, man. Just like look out the window, you know what to do.
Yeah. Beautiful. So, what is your current mission, Ryan?
Current mission now is to, I think really my biggest mission right now, which is the reason I think me and Tristan started Decentralized Radio, is education and empowerment.
Mm.
I get messages every day from people that have small fiber neuropathy like I did. And they're like me 4 years ago, where they're obsessed with the diagnosis, obsessed with the symptoms, obsessed with they're just not at they're so obsessed with the name and association that it keeps them from, I think, thinking about the grasp of like what's really going on from a
Mm.
mitochondrial point of view. Because when you look at diseases, then you understand like mitochondrial health. They're actually, a lot of them are similar. Like a lot of them could have happened for the same reasons. You
Mm-hmm.
just got lucky MS, or you got ALS, or you got neuropathy or whatever. But my mission now is to just, I want people to know they have more power than they think they do, and they
Mm.
don't need me telling them what to do. In fact, the whole idea is to like become a critical thinker. I had to take a critical thinking class to do school in California, like it's a required thing. There was nothing critical thinking about that class. Nothing. It was the same other thing. You read a book, you write stuff that you read in the book. You just dictate things that are already written. There's no thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I think my mission right now is just help people critically think and problem solve for themselves, as I've had to do and continue to have to do, and know that there isn't an end. There's just a continuous journey. And as long as you like remain open-minded, it just gets better. You know what I mean? Over time.
And you're
Um,
doing this with coaching and the podcast.
yeah. Yeah. Those are probably my primary ways. And then just like trying to get my parents on board. So just like every now and then just being very rhetorical and ranting at home and family gatherings. Um, but I like podcasts because it's hard to hide authenticity,
Mm.
um, unless you go like edit it like crazy.
Of course.
Um, and it's a great way to just free flow your thoughts. And so I think that's a great place to do it. Plus, it's great to talk to people that know way more than I do about certain things and just like take nuggets of wisdom here and there. Because that's truly what I did. Like I've worked with a lot of different practitioners for my own stuff, but no one's one philosophy was the answer. It was about taking pieces of it and then learning how to apply it to your unique situation. And that's what real coaching is like you meet someone that might have the same problem as you did, but the way you go about their life is completely different based on where they live, how they live, what their job is, their latitude, like all that stuff. That's the fun part for me, is
Mhm.
figuring out how someone else's ticks to fix their problem. And so for me, it's like if I could achieve one mission in life, it would be to get as many people to realize as they can that if they can just learn to critically think, they can solve almost any problem they have.
Mm. So, talk to me about the podcast. How and why did it come to be?
Yeah. So me and Tristan met through a friend of mine and a health coach of mine that I was working with. I worked with a guy named Ryan Carter,
Mm,
who's well known on Instagram and stuff, has great newsletters and information on Twitter, named Live Vitae.
mhm,
Shout out to that guy. He changed my life. I'd worked with a lot of practitioners. I worked with Terry Walls. I'll name drop him because I don't care. I worked with Terry Walls. I worked with someone that worked with her named Kenneth Charlin, who's a neurologist, functional neurologist. I worked with some local like naturopaths and stuff. I want to say they're all great people, and I think they're all doing their best. And I want to say all of them miss marks in very important places,
mm.
based on the fact that they want to maintain a certain message
Yeah.
and sell their paradigm. Which, hey, I get it.
Mhm.
But yeah, like eating kale doesn't do much. As much as Terry Wall says, anyways. I never thought kale was that magical. But she likes all sorts of crazy stuff. And I still love her. Like I want to talk. I want to get her on the podcast. I want to talk to her. I want to question some of these things because
Mhm.
no one seems to do that either. Everyone that has people on, they're like they kind of go with it. And they're
Exactly.
like, oh yeah, and I'm like, no, like ask them like why they don't talk about light. Like why don't you talk about seasonality? Like, don't you think it's kind of important that this happened and maybe that was the real thing that was improved, not eating like 20 pounds of roughage that got you where you are. Like, I want to ask those questions and I don't want to be combative, but I just want to be like, hey, because science is about questioning, right? It's not about like
Sure.
nodding your head. And I've
Mhm.
been a yes man long enough in my life to like get over that. But as far as the podcast, so Ryan, I'm living in Salt Lake. Tristan at the time was living between Wyoming and Salt Lake for ski season and stuff like that. Um, and Tristan, who you had on the podcast previously. And so Ryan was like, hey, you should hit up this Tristan guy and like meet up. And I was like, cool. So I found him on Instagram. I messaged him and I was like, hey, Ryan Carter told me we should meet up. And he had met Ryan Carter, I believe, at like one of the animal-based retreats that Paul Saladino did
Oh
in
wow.
Costa Rica or something like that. So he had met him at that, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it was something along those lines of how they met.
Yeah.
Um, and I was interested in his book, like Bitcoin and Beef at the time. So I got one, or he sent me one, something or other. We met up for lunch one day, and I was just trying to make more friends and get out of my own zone of like being a loner all the time. And I was like, I want to make some friends that hold similar beliefs and like
Mm-hmm.
do weird, cool shit. And so I met at lunch where this place that we buy raw milk called Redmond's, same Redmond's that sells the salt. They have a little farm in Salt Lake City, Utah. If you come out here, they got a couple of them along the Wasatch Front. Go eat there. It's great. They might as well sponsor me because I eat there like every week, multiple times. Like they might as well. They know, like we'll walk in and they'll just know what we want. They'll have it
Yeah.
ready. It's great. But and I have friends that work there too. But yeah, so we went better for lunch, and then we hung out a couple times that year. This was like fall 2022 ish. And yeah, 2022 fall, and then we kind of hung out, and then sort of in the winter, January 2023, I brought up the idea of, hey, I was like, hey man, like you got this book and stuff. I was like, I've been wanting to do a podcast again, but I don't want to do it by myself just because I've
Mm-hmm.
done that before, and it's fine, it works out. But I want some more dialogue, and I like that we could be in person
Mm-hmm.
and like do all this stuff. And I thought it'd be different, and you'd offer a different point of view than just mine all the time. And because you're very well versed, he's a very smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I kind of put it off a couple months because I was like, man, this is going to be a lot of work. I got to and then I finally buckled down in like May of 2023, and we got this thing rolling, shot a bunch of episodes. We went on the road in June in Wyoming and got a bunch of people in person together, which I've never done in-person podcasts before, especially on the road, which was a lot of fun. And we've just been doing it ever since. And like the whole goal behind the podcast has been like decentralization, just the idea of being self-sufficient, not necessarily like, hey, go and living on a homestead and stuff. We do talk about that, but more so just being like aware of how you can take control of your life, your health, your finance, all that stuff. Because all these things align, Bitcoin, all that junk. It's all decentralized or whatever. I
Yeah.
just like the buzzwords. Trying not to greenwash things also. But
Yeah.
but like he's in Austin right now interviewing people in person, which will be really cool to get up on the show. And then hopefully we can get in person again and do a bunch of road trip stuff too,
Awesome.
and get conversations. But
Yeah.
that's kind of how it came about. And then it's been just sort of like we both just like hated the jobs we already had. Like he was working in mechanical engineering, more of as like a sales rep kind of guy, and he didn't like it, and like, I didn't really like doing the stuff I had been doing and continue to do right now. And we're both looking at ways to like how can we make this the full-time thing. And so this next year is going to be the big push to like make it all happen. So a lot of exciting stuff. But it's a pretty similar story to like why people want to do stuff. They have a story. He had traumatic brain injury. I had anorexia. I had like this nerve crap. We got pissed off with conventional medicine about it. We got pissed off with functional medicine about it. And now we're like, okay, we want to talk about this and talk to people that are smarter than us and educate ourselves, and then hopefully regurgitate it in a way that is consumable. So that's kind of the goal. But that's how it came about.
And how has the podcast changed your life?
You know, in a lot of ways, I'm much smarter. um, but it's fun because
You're much smarter.
well, when you talk to people that know more than you and you let go of the idea that you think you know things, I go into every podcast being like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I'm gonna be open-minded to being completely wrong. Like we're talking to Jack Cruz tomorrow, and I know that guy's gonna rip me apart, right?
Yeah.
Specifically me. Tristan, maybe less so. We did a debriefing of the Andrew Huberman, Rick Rubin podcast in like June, and he actually reacted to it live on Facebook. So while we were live, he was living it on his phone like a good old man, like an old boomer who doesn't know how to. It was really fun.
So you recorded while he was live on Facebook?
So no, other way around. He recorded us while we were live on YouTube, and he streamed it to Facebook. So he was reacting to our reaction.
Your
live.
reaction, yeah, I remember.
And you can still probably find it. And I didn't watch the whole thing, other than I knew he was tearing us apart because he was commenting in our chat, and he'd be like, "You missed this," or "No," or "You're finally getting blah," and then he'd be like, "Nope, didn't do that."
That's so Jack Cruz.
And at first, I didn't actually think it was the real him because it was just like an icon that said just like DJ, and I was like, "This could be anybody." But then while we were streaming, I went to Facebook and I saw it, and I was like, "Whoa!" I was like sending it to my mom. I was like, "Dude, this guy's freaking ripping us a butthole right here." But you know, I get it, and I want to be in that position too, where it's like I don't want to talk about something if we're 80% right. I'm okay talking about it, but I want it to be upfront that, hey, we might be missing something. And I was glad that he did that because he can correct where we didn't get his story right. And we made the massive mistake in that podcast of like totally ditching melanin. Like we barely talked about it. I don't even know why, because that was like the story was melanin.
Yeah.
And we just didn't even talk about it. I felt so dumb afterwards, and I saw his reaction. I was like, man, we're idiots. But it'll be great to have him on and have him, you know, correct us, tear us open, and get the story right. But I kind of go into more podcasts like that now, just being open-minded to being wrong. And where I got to be more comfortable is being okay with sometimes probably sounding stupid because I don't really get what's happening, but I need to ask the question so that I can get it, and just be okay with the audience knowing I don't know it. You know what I mean? And that's sort of a thing that I got to get more comfortable with, and I'm getting there. But yeah, it's crazy stuff. But how it's changed me is it's just like, it's made me more willing to be wrong and more willing to seek out what the truth is and ask better questions. Because I was very much like I'll take your word for it type of guy for a long time. And and it really taught me to like, no, we got to question these things and be like, you know, that doesn't make sense.
Questioning is very important nowadays. Absolutely.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah. So I think you already touched on this a little bit because you wanted to spread education and consciousness. You started your coaching, but also because of, you know, your story. So why did you ever start? Why did the idea come to be that you wanted to start to coach?
After working with Ryan and seeing how he did things, I was like, man, I finally found what I want to do, like with my life. I want to learn about this weird shit. I want to help people figure out their weird shit. Not to say shit too many times, but I want to help them figure out their stuff. And I want them to be empowered to never need me again or anybody else. Because they know if they have a problem, they know what to look for, and they know to go back to nature, and they know
Mhm.
how to troubleshoot it.
Mhm.
Um, it's all about empowerment, I think. Because I think a lot of the thing is with j- all systems, but just we'll hit the medicine side of things,
Mhm.
is everyone feels like they have no control. It's just like, I got high blood pressure, I gotta take, this high blood pressure med because genetically I'm screwed. They have
Exactly.
no, the whole paradigm is built around you have no choice,
Mhm.
but you do. In fact, all you have is choices.
Mhm.
And that when I realized that, I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. Like I can do it all. And the beautiful thing is, even when you mess up or you don't follow exactly what you know you need to do, even though you did it, I'd rather know what I'm doing wrong that day
Mhm.
than think I'm okay and it's truly screwing me up. Because
Mhm.
when you know something, you can course correct. You know what I mean? And so it's like I had one day the other day where I was editing some shorts and stuff, and I was like literally doing it all day long. And I was on a screen and I was like, dang, I need to go outside for a minute because I'm screwing myself up. But it's
Yeah.
like you know it. So it's like you're going into it knowing so you can take action. I'd rather be in that position than just blindly not know anything.
Of
And
course.
then some crazy stuff happens. And then next thing you know, you're in hospice or something. And you felt like the entire time it was destined.
Mhm.
And maybe it was based on behavior, but you didn't know. I just want people to know things. Like I talk to my dad sometimes because he's very much worked in pharma and very much is like a stereotypical, like conventional thinker around medicine and trusting doctors and stuff. And I look at him and be like, dude, your HDL is low, not because you have a genetic blah, blah, like
Mhm.
your predisposition, blah, blah, blah. But like you live like crap. Like
Mhm.
you're a tubby dude. You don't go outside. Um, like you're doing it all wrong, man. Like, sure, you're like hormone replacement therapy. There's a time and place and things like that, but you're not utilizing it correctly. Like you're on T and you feel like crap because you don't do anything. You're
Mhm.
relying on the T to feel better. Like that's just an example. But it's
Mhm.
like it's the idea of like reliance on something that inherently doesn't fix a problem.
You're not doing anything yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing too is like I tell every client this is like you'll come out of this experience either doing nothing of it and thinking it was a failure, or you'll come out thinking you're a completely different person.
Mhm.
And the thing is, everyone goes into a coaching situation. If you've never done it before, I know this from experience being on the patient side, saying like, man, I just want to get back to where I was like before
Yeah.
I got sick. No, that's the worst thing you could ever do because that's the person that got you sick.
Mm.
You want to be someone new. You need
Mhm.
to write down on a piece of paper. I have every client do this. Write down person you want to leave behind, person you want to become, traits you hate, like traits you want to get rid of, traits you want to become. Like self visualization is super powerful.
Mhm.
And if you can't do that, then you're doing it. You're not thinking it through because it's like I think what people don't think about is they're so caught up in like feeling terrible and like I just want to feel good that they don't think about like what would I do with feeling good. You know what I mean? And I've
Mm.
been to a place where it was like super crippling. And so now that I feel like considerably better, what I'm doing with that vitality is this stuff. So I thought about it and I was like, you know what? Working with Ryan, I was like, I want to do this stuff. I want to go back to school and get my NTP and help people.
Mhm.
Um, you know what I mean? And you can do that without NTP, but
And how do you help your clients? How do you approach your clients? Let's say I'm 30-year-old with severe hypertension,
Mhm.
their headaches every day. I pop Tylenols like they're candy. How do you approach your clients? How do you help them realize that they have to change and they have to be someone
Let
new?
me give you my favorite example. It was a 67-year-old woman, oldest client I'd ever worked with at the time. I was a
Mhm.
little hesitant going into it because I know as you get older, I feel like you tend to latch on to ideas about things and you're a little unopen minded. But she seemed a little open minded. So I was like, hey, you and me, 90 days, let's do this. Let's change some behaviors. I can't promise you'll feel like a goddess in
Mhm.
90 days. But
But
what I
you've
can promise you is you'll view things never the same again. And you'll be empowered to take action that we took in the 90 days and continue that, whether
Mhm.
you keep working with me or not. And the coolest thing is she had small fiberopathy, pain levels of 10
Mhm.
every day. Like she would tell like, and she was so strong. Like you would not know she had it because she held it in. Um, Osteoarthritis pain, like two terrible knees, told she needs both of them replaced. Stereotypical like older person things.
Of course.
The neuropathy was on top, and I was like, hey, we're gonna change your paradigm on how you view everything. Um, she actually wasn't on any pain medication at the time, minus like Tylenol and stuff, because she knew going down that route of like um, certain antidepressants and gabapentin and stuff was just not good news. Like they, even if it helped, it was like you're trading one poison for another.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I was in a good spot with her to like, hey, let's take action.
She
And
was
I
aware.
told, yeah. Um, and what I had her do was like, I approach everyone differently, but I sit down with everyone for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. I go through their whole life story because I find that knowing their life and their experiences is valuable.
Of
Because
course.
for me, my problem started not when I got neuropathy or
Mhm,
not when I had anorexia, but 10 years before that, when
mhm.
I started developing really bad social anxiety, when I moved and when I started stuffing my emotions. The body keeps the score, and that's where everything started.
The body
Um,
to score.
Great book, by the way. It's a great book. I think everyone should read the body keeps the score. I like to quote it. But it's about how emotional entrapment can cause physical manifestation and cancer and all sorts of things. I think that's just a massive part that no one tackles. So I like to focus on that quite a
Mhm,
bit throughout our journey. And that's why I like continuous communication and bi-weekly meetings or weekly meetings for the first little stint to sort of
mhm,
get the pace. But I like to sit down with someone for an hour and a half, hear their whole life story, and I'll build out a plan for them that encompasses all these nature law things that we talk about, sun, light, water, magnetism, in a way that complements their living situation. I have them video their house to not be creepy, but get an idea of like what's their electromagnetic
yeah,
environment,
yeah,
where's
yeah.
their Wi-Fi box, what access to outdoors do they have, what access to light indoors do they have, what's their lighting look like, do we need to replace the light bulbs in their bedroom, do we need to get a blackout curtain, stuff like that. Because everyone's so different. Like, and I have clients that live in New York and Florida, do different things because they're at
Yeah.
different latitudes. One of them is way luckier and gets sun all year round, bastard. Um, but I tell him, I'm like, dude, you're lucky. Like, stay.
Mhm,
um, but with her, she was in Santa Barbara area, California. And so she was like decent, like a little more northern latitude, but she had the ocean there. She could go
mhm,
ground in the ocean. So yeah, she still had like some Van Island belt issues with being in California. So we really worked on like electromagnetic stuff in her house and
mhm,
trying to minimize non-native EMF. She lived in the country, so it wasn't as bad.
mhm.
So, but
What was
we
about
had our hour and a half, 2 hour meeting. I write like a freaking 20-page plan. Everyone's plan is different lengths. The longest what I've written is like 40 pages of stuff. And that's just to get all my thoughts out. It's not like, hey, do 40 pages of stuff day one. It's like,
it's under
here's the goal. I call it
mhm,
sort of like my constitution of health. It's a living, breathing document that changes over time. But it's something you can refer to a year from now when we're not working together and be like, oh, I forgot to keep doing this. I should do this again. And
yeah.
so you can keep it in tabs. And I really like that. I wish I had had that. And that's something that Ryan sort of gave to me was like this idea of like continual growth and continual change. And so I was like, I want a document that people can use. That's not a protocol. That's
Mhm,
not like it's not a 12-step program. It's not a 30-day challenge. This is like a thing that's going to change throughout our 3 months. And I'm going to write it in a way that you can look at it seasonally and alter things based on
mhm,
the time of year. So then we do that. And then I like to honestly, for 90 days, I really like to meet with people at least biweekly. If it were working longer and we're doing a year or 6 months, I like to do the first 90 days of those periods, meeting more frequently and troubleshooting and
mhm,
getting things into a realm of consistency because health comes from ruthless consistency,
mhm.
not the pursuit of perfection. The 2% better mentality every day is like a lot that I follow. Thank you, Carrie B. Wellness, for the saying. Um, and by the end of actually 3 months, she was like messaging me and she's like, dude, like, I don't need to take Tylenol anymore. Like, my knees are not swelling. I messaged her just to get a testimonial from a month ago. And she's like, dude, I started like hiking a little bit. And I was like, dang, crazy. Cause you were like pretty much couldn't walk
Mhm.
when we first met. And so if I could see dramatic change in someone that's 67 years old, like what else can happen?
Mhm.
And so that was the proof of work I needed to say, you know what, I can help people. And there's not a date limit on the way this knowledge can assist. your mitochondria if you employ the principles.
Mhm.
Um, and she was a real testament to, I think, growth and change. I think she probably had some high blood pressure issues. I can't quite remember, but
Mhm.
it's funny. I look at those and I don't hyper focus on them as much as I look at them as like, okay, we're going to create health and then we'll see what happens to those issues. And usually they dissipate.
Mhm.
It's really fascinating. So I don't like to look at myopically 100% of my energy on like one symptom. I really want to look on a mitochondrial level because fundamentally, amongst pretty much every issue, there's some sort of mitochondrial dysfunction and there's some
I'm sure there.
lack of energy going on in here, energy inefficiency. And so it's about optimizing energy. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so when you do that, crazy stuff happens. Like I'm really interested to see, like with my dad, if he'll listen to me into the new year, if he drops 20 pounds, like barely changing, but just like implementing some of the philosophies. And then, like I was telling you the story of my mom who's diagnosed with osteoporosis recently, and my goal with her is between now and the next time she gets a bone density scan in 2 years, by optimizing her mitochondria, her DC electric current, all this stuff, I want to see that go up in
How are
two
you
years.
working with your mom?
Um, it's still a little yet to be determined because it's a little bit like semantics right now.
Mm.
But over the holiday, when we have time to really get intimate, I want to sit down with her. I'm gonna do a similar approach where I know her life story, so I don't really need to do that stuff. But I'm
Mhm.
gonna sit down with her, and instead of writing 20 pages of stuff, I'm gonna give her sort of like the weekly, like we're gonna focus on this week, making it a consistent pattern. And then once you got that nailed, we're gonna add this. And then
Mhm.
once you got that nailed, we're gonna get this.
Mm.
Um, Food's the least of my worries.
Mhm.
Um, it's funny, the more you know, I feel like the less you really got to worry about what to eat. That's the first thing everyone worries about when you work with them is what
Mhm.
can I eat? And it's more just like, hey, look out your window, like what's
Yeah.
growing? And then like there's your answer. And then get some DHA. But it's like it's pretty funny. But what the difference between, I think a lot of people have the knowledge I have. The
Mhm.
difference is the intimacy.
Mm.
And I really connect with these people. And I feel like we become, in some ways, friends. Like there are people that I've worked with that I still chat with every now and then.
Mhm.
Just like shooting the shit.
Mhm.
You really create a relationship, you create community. And I'm
Mm.
trying to create community with the people that I work with, not just give them an antidote or whatever, and then send them on their way out the door. You know what I mean? I like I like to hear what they're doing with their health. And to me, having had the experience of being in their shoes, I think that I'm a valuable arsenal in their toolbox or whatever to confide in. That's part of it. Is like being able to emotionally relate to the person, not just because it's not just all
I
physical.
think
Like
that's the most
it is emotional.
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's the best and most important part from coaching, and that's what makes you a good coach.
Yeah, that's the goal anyways. I get better every day.
Mhm.
That's stuff. I definitely there's stuff like 5 months ago that I probably wouldn't approach the same now. Um, but it's mostly communication stuff.
Mm.
The real key to being a good coach is meeting people where they're at, because not everyone's in the same place. Not everyone gets the same jargon. So you got to meet them on their language, you know what I mean, and work with their realm of understanding and help
Of
them
course.
increase that. So that's the beauty of
Mm.
coaching, is like learning the finesse of how people think and how people work, because everyone's a little different. That's also what keeps it interesting. Like if it was the same and I was an MD and I would just give you like is it simvastatin, something like that, just for like cholesterol, it'd be such a boring job. It'd be like it'd be so boring.
Yeah. Of
So
course.
much more exciting.
How do you think your journey has impacted your family?
You know, it's hard to say. I've never been good with my family at always knowing what they're thinking. And I
Mm.
think that's just because of some of the trauma stuff that I went through. I try to block some stuff out. I very much have had the issue of like trying to over please my family and have them be proud of me, which is
Mm.
ridiculous because they are kind of no matter what. It seems like um, um, I'd like to think that I'd like to think that it's made everyone more well-rounded. But I think one of the best things that my mom ever told me was like, like maybe like 2 years ago. She was like, man, like this is the Ryan that I missed. Like I was actually myself again, you know, because I was just so caught up in all this junk, um, that I wasn't me anymore. And so to be me again from just being like jokey and happy go lucky and stuff, was really cool to like hear that from them. They definitely are more cognizant of things. Like my mom
Yeah,
will ask me
say.
questions. My
Mhm.
mom will send me, my grandparents have a cabin up in Michigan that we go to. It's a great place to get away from EMF and just embrace. You're in the woods, like you're in the
Mhm.
woods. So in the summer it's great. In the winter it's not. But in the summer, like she'll go up there for like 2 months, and we'll go visit her and stuff. But she'll send me pictures of like, yeah, I'm grounding outside in the woods, and she'll send me pictures like, yeah, I'm drinking my morning coffee outside, grounded, looking at sunrise. And so it's funny to see how people change. Like my dad's been sending me photos, a couple months ago when it still wasn't so cold. He's like outside shirtless. He's like, yeah, I'm mowing the lawn, but I'm shirtless. I'm I'm, I'm downloading.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I was
You know
about to
the
say
word.
it probably has made your family much more conscious and aware of the world they live in and how to deal with their health.
They definitely question more things. Like even like with the osteoporosis thing, like her doctor would give her a suggestion, and then she would come to me and be like, "Hey, what do you think about this thing? Like,
Yeah.
do I need to inject this thing to me every 6 months?" And I'm like, "No, no, you're missing the point. You're putting the cart before the horse."
Mm-hmm.
And so it's cool to have like that. It's nice to have that level of trust with people, because
Mm-hmm.
to make a relationship work in a coaching scenario, even with your families, you gotta have that trust,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to just like kind of let go. Because I think what held me back for a long time was like I didn't trust the people I worked with entirely,
Mm.
so I didn't even give them a fair shot sometimes, which was unfair of me. Like you got to give them a shot, you know what I mean? Obviously if they're saying something that's really crazy, like maybe yeah, get some opinions, but you got to like have some willingness to be like, okay, I'm going out into the unknown and be okay with it. And
Mm.
that's where people have a trouble, is like there's a safety in going to your doctor, even if you know what they're telling you is crap and doesn't help.
That is such a big problem. Yeah.
But there's that safety that's been built into our psyche that needs
Mm.
to be kind of like erased and be like, it's okay to question their idea.
I've
Um,
seen that very close to a couple of people very close to me, and that really resonates. That is completely true. That is, yeah.
mhm. Yeah, it's big. I think that's a big one. Just
Mm-hmm.
being willing to, that's what I'm saying. It goes back to like willing to be okay with not knowing things, being
Mm-hmm.
okay with your paradigm being completely crushed
Mm-hmm.
at times, and then being able to rebuild it. I think it's really cool because it's like it's kind of been fun to realize that everything I thought I knew growing up was like almost completely backwards.
It's
Um,
amazing to learn and to keep growing. It's
mhm.
beautiful.
And for me to learn it at 23 was great.
Mm.
But I was telling my client that was 67, I was like, hey, it's better late than never. Like
Of
you're not
course.
you're not in bed, pumping out your last breath, and
You're
now
so
we're figuring it out. You got
mm.
time.
Mhm.
The gift of time is everything. And
Mhm.
that's what you learn when you get sick. Doesn't matter what it is.
Mhm.
That you realize that time is the most precious thing ever.
Mm.
And so you're willing to do anything. And this is something, my boss had terminal cancer and fought it holistically and was successful. But like he'll meet cancer patients, and I think almost the worst thing you can do is like there's so much fear built into it that I think fear kills you faster than the cancer does sometimes.
100%. Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like it's hard, but you got to be okay with where you're at. Like even when you're in like crippling pain, like I've been in crippling pain from like nerve pain, like burning, but there's sort of like a great release in being like, you know what, this is where I'm at. Doesn't mean this is where I have to stay, but this is where I'm at, and you got to accept it.
Mm.
Because
That's beautiful.
if you're constantly just fighting it, you
Yeah.
can't beat something with anger. You know what I mean?
It makes it worse.
Yeah. That's why I hate the saying, actually, like the hashtag fuck cancer. Like I hate that, because you don't beat cancer with anger.
Exactly.
So that's with anything. And I think the thing I want to get people to know is like whether you have an autoimmune disease or like type 2 diabetes or like you got a glioblastoma, like these things are more similar than they are different when it comes to health. Because
Mm.
like
Similar to they are different. Mhm.
as far as like the mechanism for why things happen, like you're screwing up your like the way your body works. Like it's really just about restoring how your body works.
Mhm.
And once you know that, I think it becomes easier because they're not so worried about
Absolutely.
this specific thing. And so that's like actually the first thing I try to get every client to understand is like, hey, let's stop calling it neuropathy, or stop calling it RA, and let's start focusing on mitochondria, and it becomes something else.
Of course.
So yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think.
What brings you most joy in life, Ryan?
Being outside.
Mm,
Like legit. Doesn't matter where it is. Like if I can be outside, just like rip my shirt off. Like everyone makes fun of me. Like my girlfriend's grandfather passed away from Alzheimer's in September. I
mm,
wish I had known him 10 years ago, because I think we could have had some fun discussions, because he was into health stuff. But I
mm,
think he just was missing the mark on a few things. But he would have been receptive. He was really interested and curious. He was a very scientific minded person.
mm,
Um, if I had met him long ago. But during that time, I would take breaks and like go sit outside on their front lawn, and like family members would come over and be like, "Hey, do you guys know this like weird hippie dude sitting out on your lawn that's like shirtless on the ground?" Like, and I was like, "Yeah, it's me." I love being outside. I love making people turn their heads when I'm walking down the street shirtless in December.
mm.
Um, I've had people like yell at me, like they're like, "What are you doing?" And be like, "I'm downloading. I'm a solar panel." Um,
I love that.
uh, I was talking to my girlfriend's father the other day about how I can sleep a full night without having to pee. And he was like amazed that that was a possibility.
Yeah, I'm jealous of you now.
Well, and it's like, not that I think maybe it's inherently evil, but it does tell you like something about your physiology and cortisol and other things. Like it's not just cortisol, but like a bunch of stuff. And I was like, I realized things are really moving for me when I could sleep all through the night and like not wake up from a noise, or
Hmm.
like not have to go pee at like 2 a.m. every day. I did that my whole life. Like my whole life was like that. And so I've had like a year now where it's like never happened.
Mm,
Even when it's like I didn't have an optimal like nighttime routine, or even if I didn't eat something that like over the holiday, like I splurged a little bit for Thanksgiving, I still was out like a light, slept fine. And that's just through building resilience. You can kind of mess some things up, not too consistently, but you can still kind of like do some things and then
mhm.
come back from it. And that's the goal, right? The goal isn't to be like carnivore forever or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you have to be, you got to kind of question like, okay, why do I got to do that to not feel like junk?
Hmm.
Um, that's the thing too, is like one of my missions is to just rip people from thinking that one thing is the answer.
Mm,
Because especially with the diet stuff, it's like, and I've tried 1,000 diets, and because they didn't fix me, that's why I've come to the conclusion that it's like, maybe this isn't all it is, you know.
yeah.
And most of the people come to work with me have done a bunch of diets, and it's not, maybe it got them like 60% better, but they still got something.
Hmm.
And it's like, dude, they're like, what is it? And they get so overjoyed when I say, yeah, diet's not everything. They're just like, yes, thank goodness,
Yeah.
because I'm done trying to do this thing. Not that it's not important, but it's changing the context.
Hmm.
I don't know. Honestly, I get joyful over very simple things. Like this conversation is very joyful to me. I
I
love
love
talking about this stuff.
being
I
in the
love,
moment, like you said at the start. It's very
yeah,
important.
yeah. It's the number one thing that I try to do most of the time, if I can, is like be in the moment. Plan for tomorrow, don't be stupid, but don't focus so hard on tomorrow that you miss today. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
probably the biggest thing anyone can do.
yeah, something that happens a lot, I think, to me, and I'm pretty sure to anyone, is that when you go outside or when you're in nature, it really focuses you and it really forces you to be in the moment. So it's so much more joyful. It's so
Yeah.
much more beautiful.
Hiking is great because especially when you go up into the mountains, you have like no service most
Hmm.
of the time. So you're forced to connect
Hmm.
because nothing else is stimulating.
Hmm.
Like this is my number one worst enemy. I like Michigan State, but they're trash this year. They're doing horrible. But like, yeah, this is like this thing, greatest tool, worst enemy, same
Yeah,
thing.
it's
And
interesting.
and, and it was actually for me for a long time. And I have moments where I struggle and I gotta like, oh, we gotta like turn it off, put it over here for 2 hours. Um,
Mm,
because it sucks you in, man. The dopamine sucks
mm,
you in and it's draining your dopamine out. And
mhm,
then you can't get it back because you're just depleted. And so it's a vicious cycle.
mhm,
Um, yeah, I think the phone's the worst thing. Like I have nieces that have iPads, and like one of them's 2 years old and has an iPad, and she's attached. She'll get pissed if you take it away. She'll
mhm,
get pissed when it doesn't work. She drags it around all cute and stuff. But I've talked to her parents, and I'm like, listen, you're destroying her. Like
mhm,
I'm not trying to be mean or like question your parenting or anything. Like I get it, it's rough, but
mhm.
like You weren't raised with this thing. I wasn't raised with this thing. Your parents didn't have this thing yet. They didn't even know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't need it. And like, stop using it as a crutch because you're going to destroy them. Like, I'm not trying to be mean or combative, but it's like, I'm just trying to give you the truth. Like, do you want an operational human being? Or do you want someone with crazy mental health illness and like potentially other stuff?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, no. Um, so that's the hardest thing to watch. Like, yeah, if I have children, like they'll probably hate me for like not giving them a phone till they're like 18, 20.
I don't think they will hate
If
you.
they understand, I think they'll get it. If they understand, like I have a friend who has like crazy primal children, and they'll like when they get angry, they'll be like, "You're acting like a vegan," to like the other kid. It's so funny. It's so great. I was like, man, these kids are something.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, and to watch them, what actually observing a child's really valuable. It's like watching pets or
Mm.
animals because they sort of have when they're fresh, they sort of have some innate instincts like this kid that I was talking about with the iPad problem, she loves meat. Like
Mm-hmm.
she'll go. I introduced her to beef tongue, and she'll just eat. She'll want meat more than anything, and
Mm-hmm.
that like clues me in on something. Like she needs meat,
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so like watching them, and I always like watching how they move around just physically because they can squat. Like they have the most mobility ever. I'm like to my girlfriend's sister-in-law. I'm like, keep this kid squatting to pick things up. Like she'll thank you forever later down the line. Like keep the mobility.
Yeah.
Because it's funny because it's like, uh, yeah, it's like children know things that we don't know because they're just doing it
Mm-hmm.
until you mess them up and you try to give them all these norms and crap. But they know things like they know what to do. It's funny. Yeah, it's like having a dog kind of till they're like 3 years old because they're like running around, pooping on the floor. Uh, I actually watched my niece. We went out camping and we were like, she wanted to go to the bathroom. I was like, yeah, just go in the bushes over there. She just walks over to the trail path, rips down her pants, just poops on the trail.
Mm-hmm.
That was the funniest thing. And then she thought that that was okay. So she started doing that at the house, I guess. And I was like, sorry, guys. I didn't mean to teach her that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Ryan, so for my last question, is there any general piece of advice you'd like to leave the listeners here or myself? Anything?
Yeah. Firstly, if you think you're right, start questioning it.
Mm.
Um, and not in like a mean, combative way,
Mm-hmm.
but question other people and their like thought patterns and the way they think about the world. Because that's how you have like discussions that lead you to realizations that change your life.
Mm.
Probably the biggest thing. And then two, like go outside. Like there's literally like go outside is the biggest piece of health information I could tell anybody. And I'll tweet it like randomly. I'm not big on Twitter or anything, but like 90%
Yes.
of the time my message is like something about go outside because if you're doing something wrong 90% of the time it's because you're not outside.
Mm-hmm.
Go outside as often as you can. I'm gonna try and go outside right after this before I have to go to therapy.
Yeah, me
And
too.
like but yeah, go outside and question stuff.
That's beautiful. Ryan, thank you so much, man. It was a really, really good rip. This was amazing. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and your time.
You too, man. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you, man.